been a little bit since I've made a video just for fun. Been doing a lot of videos and things for classes. And I thought we would actually do a chord and form analysis of Fur Elise, which is top 3 Beethoven's most famous pieces. It's the one that everybody knows, and pianists, if you learn it at the beginning, and then if you go on, you learn the other sections, and then at some point you dread it because it's played a lot, and then eventually you come back around and you love it again because it's charming. This is a rondo, which means it's a 5-part rondo, which means it has an A section, which is this first page, and then a contrasting B section, returns to A again, contrasting C part, and then return to A again. It's different than a ritornello or ritornelli form from the Baroque because although ritornellos have recurring themes, rondos, at least in this, by the time we get to here as a developed form, have complete reiterations of the piece in their original key, whereas ritornelli and other sort of derivative French dance forms that are similar can have the main sort of piece come back in modified forms or in different keys and different formats. A good example of that would be the first movement of Spring by Vivaldi, and you can hear the main theme come back again in different ways, in different incarnations. But in rondos, you just get this whole thing redone again. There can be slight changes, but for the most part it's intact and in the original key. Before we jump into this, I just want to make a little form map, because knowing a little bit about related keys can be very helpful. So not a form map, I guess a key map for forms. So what we like to do is we like to say, what key are we in? We'll make this major keys and this minor keys, and we're in the key of A minor, right? And so then you can say, well, what's the relative major? C major. And then you should say, so this is 0 sharps and flats. So you should say, well, what's 1 sharp and what's 1 flat? In other words, you go 1 less sharp or 1 more flat and one more sharp. So then this would be E minor, and this would be a G major, right? And this would be F major and D minor. Not always, but this is the area where composers like to play. If they're not, then they're deviating from that. It's pieces like to move in those areas. And I guess I'll just kind of show you how that might work to begin with. This first section's in A minor, right? And then when we get done, let's get the whole piece here. We move on to the next section, the B section, and we're in the key of F minor. We see this C7, F in first inversion, C7 again, and then F, right? And if you think about it, that's 1 flat, right? And furthermore, as this section gets halfway done, it changes to the key of C, which is the dominant of F, which is right there, the relative major, right? We get to we go back to the A section, but we get to the C part right here. There's this pedal A, but if you look, this is 7 of D minor, and we have this sort of D minor thing going on for a while, and that's there as well. It does modulate and come back, though. It's more it's more like a transitory or transitions area, and then we come back to the key of A minor again. So those are, important things to note. If we can get our world figured out here, that's good. Also, another thing is, if we go back to earlier places in the classical period and then into the Baroque period and look at rondos, they have developed their main sections. Well, all the sections have gotten larger and more complicated over time. If we look at Vivaldi or other people, their rondos might be a pair of phrases or a short binary piece or something like that, and they expand out and become slightly more complicated forms. So much so that Fur Elise, the A section, on its own, which people learn, is a complete piece in itself. It has this opening theme right here, and it repeats it, and then it has a bridge right here in the relative major. So we're actually going to the key of C major right here, right? And then it comes back to the key of A minor. I guess you can transition it there, but it starts over again, the main theme right there. And so if we were looking at this from a music theory point of view, we would say that this is a ternary piece, simple ternary, having an A section, a B section, and then a complete repeat or return to the A section again there. And if we want to go further, we would say this is a 2 reprise, sectional, talk about what that means, simple ternary piece. So 2 reprise means that the first section of A is repeated, and sectional means that the cadence at the end of the A section, this first section here, is on the tonic chord. It's an authentic cadence in the original key. If it had gone to anything other than the tonic chord or gone to a different key when it cadenced right there, we would call that continuous, meaning that it was incomplete and needed to go on. So this is part of the reason why this is so easily published for beginning pianists or intermediate pianists, emerging pianists. It's because it makes its own little piece, and in some ways that's too bad because the rest of the piece is very charming as well. And I'll do a video on that another time. Let's just get started with this. Okay. It's interesting to note that this is all made up of arpeggios, right? And then scales. Arpeggios and then scales, right? And we can just come in here and we can analyze these things. So if I'm in the key of A minor, I'm looking for 1 and 5 chords, and this whole thing is made up of 1 and 5 chords. Here's my, well, we'll talk about this in a minute, but here's my A, E, A, C. This is all A minor, right? I'm just going to call that a 1 chord if I can get my pen to work. Hold on. There we go. That's a 1 chord right there, right? And then it goes to my 5 chord, E, G sharp. There's another E, G sharp, B, right? 5 chord, and they're in root positions, right? This should be pretty familiar to you when you get this. I'm looking sideways, but you know, right, and it just goes back to the 1. Some people get sophisticated and say, oh, it's just 1 and 5 chords, or you know, tonics and dominants. Where's the rest of the stuff? But I think it's great. I mean, you know, yeah. Let's talk about this thing right here. There's a 1 chord here undoubtedly, and this sits up on the dominant note. But when we add the rest of this, and that's an escape tone right there. This is E, B, and D, which if you think about from an E, G sharp, B, and D perspective, it's these notes from my 5-7 chord. This is an escape tone right there. So it's an implied 5 chord, which makes sense because we're going 5-7 into my 1 right there. Okay, so we can probably call this an implied 5-7 because it's the same, right? Non-chord tones and then escape tone right there. And then 1, right? 5, and then 1 again. And root position 5 chord right there, root position 1 chord, root on top here. This is a perfect authentic cadence. And it does it again right here, okay? So it's great. And then the middle section is actually very similar. Left hand has got the same kind of figuration where you're doing root, 5th, root, and then root, root, 3rd, crossing over like that. Well, we get a little sequence here. And let's just analyze this. This is what we call a direct or phrase modulation, where it just says new phrase, new section, new key, right? So we get to here, and then it's just, which is sort of like my G7 chord, right? Right, it's got my G, B, D right there. And then here we have a C major chord, C, E, G, C, right? So there's my 1 chord in the key of C major, right? And this would be a appoggiatura, leap up, step down. This is my 5 chord, G, G, B, D, right? F, if you want, it's a compound line going like this and like that, right there. So we can call this a 5. You can call it a 7 right there if you like. This is another appoggiatura, right? And that instead of going to a 1 like this did, going 1, 5, 1, has to say, let's get back home to the other key. This is just a little glass of water in the middle of a meal so that it sort of cleans your palate so you can taste it again, right? Okay, you're okay with the key of A minor again. So this is an A minor chord right here. Like this is a C major chord, right? This is a G7 chord right here, and this is an A minor chord right there, and it's not quite back in the original key yet. That's there, but we're transitioning. And so this is a 6 chord, which is a deceptive progression, 1, 5, 6, and then, you know, you can say 6 equals 1 at that point if you want. This is my 5 chord note. This is prolonged pedal note, 5. Well, maybe just this actually. It's not even a chord, just scale degree 5, going like that until we get to our proper 5/7 chord right there, and then we're back again, just like that. Okay, so direct modulation, pivot chord modulation, we come back, and then we just finish the piece off. It's a complete reiteration of that there, just no repeat on it. Well, there is actually a repeat, and then it takes you back to there. And some people will say, isn't this a binary piece of this whole section gets redone? And that's not the case. It's something that, like when you're new to analysis, you might think so, like you got a A section and a B section, but you have to look a little closer and say, is this rounded binary where it has a B section with a little piece of the front coming back to the end, or is it ternary where it's a B section and a complete restatement of the A section again, right? In this case it is, so that's why we call it ternary. Okay, and over the page we just, you know, we get this right there before we move on to the next section, which is not in this packet. All right. And you know, you might say like, well, why know this other than it's fun? I think it's really helpful in helping you memorize what's going on. The fact that you can go like root, fifth, root, right here in the, sorry, up here, and then this is, you know, root, root, skip over to the third and arpeggiate up. You get the same figure in the key of C, so you can chunk all this information together. All right. Probably next video will be B section of this, so we can look at it by comparison. But for now,